We've just heard the opening stanza from a major work, a substantial work for solo double bass. That work is called All That Is Solid Melts Into Air. The opening stanza, Soul's Lament, Rising Tides. And tomorrow night, Musica at La Mama will see a re-presentation of that work, this time around not just for double bass, but also for Tony Hicks, various saxophones, and Peter Neville, various percussion. The gentleman that composed the work and performed it there and will be performing it collaboratively tomorrow night is my guest, Mr. Nick Tsiavos. Nick, welcome back to Triple R.
Afternoon, Owen.
So this work is a slightly different arrangement. When was it originally composed?
Between 93 and 94 in Kensington, of all places. And it's just, I was looking for a vehicle that would allow me to actually extend my time, as a soloist on stage, and started gathering the thematics that sort of developed the structure that informed my improvisation.
It is a substantial work. How long does the entire work run for?
Depending on the ambience, between 50 and 70 minutes. Yeah.
And so that's a fairly wide spread. So obviously there is sort of sections that you can improvise within. It's not a fully notated work.
Well, you can actually play it fully notated, or you could actually extend there are areas where allows instability to creep in and allow you to well, it's important. It's an important aspect in my music that allows you to re-examine it given the particular position on any given day.
We'll talk about the title and some of the somewhat provocative liner notes that accompany the recorded version of it. But I suppose in a sense, given that you've now represented this work on a number of occasions and tomorrow night in a different context as well, in a sense the title almost becomes a bit self-referential, doesn't it?
It does. I have to constantly reinvent myself.
Well, the liner notes and indeed the motivation behind the work, it does explore some fairly grand themes and cultural phenomena. How do you go about addressing those sorts of things only through the double bass?
Well, that was my personal challenge, and I suppose that you can always argue, because it's it's an abstraction. There's no, sort of song lyrics or anything like that. They were actual. Each cell of the work had particular reference to, cultural specifics, political specifics. For instance, one of the works of Maps and Those Not On Them, I was reading an article in the early 90s, I think it was in Arena, about somebody driving through the official, driving through Singapore, and then knowing that the part of Singapore they're driving was not officially recognised on the map of Singapore. I mean, there's teeming humanity all around, buildings everywhere, but it was not part of the, of Singapore as far as Singapore was concerned. So, and that just got me thinking. That was one of the themes that run through the work.
And then when you revisit the work, given it was originally composed in the mid-90s, those cultural phenomena, those political phenomena have changed. We might talk about whether they've changed for the better or for the worse, but they've certainly changed.
Yes.
Do you go back and then reapproach the work based on the original thematic material that led to this work?
Well, that's... I think, we're always, I suppose, burdened with a bit of history, and you can't really... it is of its time, yet I think it's flexible enough. I don't think the conditions have changed so much. In fact, they may have been more... There's been more attenuated now than before. I mean, it is that thing of different mythologies, playing on your psyche, and where do you go? What do you believe? You see something. Is it real? Are you connected to it, or are you alienated from it? And these themes were all running, and they still run. Maybe in some ways you can argue that specifics may change, but I don't think the actual narratives have lost their potency.
Some of the moods I hear in this work, one thing I don't really hear is anger. It's interesting, you've written quite extensively, and it's quite a passionate rant, to use again your own word. Is that a difficult thing to avoid, getting angry musically?
No, I know some fine practitioners of that art form, and perhaps that's got more to do with a sense of yes, I think there's the rage. There is a rage there, but it is, bedded down in impotency. It is so far down that you know that you can't actually change a lot of this thing. You're really railing against injustice, or some of these forces that sort of try to seduce you, as I say, on one side, yet really eroding everything underneath you at the same time.
I'm talking with double bassist Nick Tsiavos. We're talking about a performance at Musica at La Mama tomorrow night. In fact, it's at the Carlton Courthouse, which of course is managed by La Mama Theatre in Carlton. The work, All That Is Solid, Melts Into Air, originally for solo double bass. This time around, you're joined by Tony Hicks and Peter Neville. When did you first start working with these two gentlemen?
Oh, well, there you go. The old farts. Let's see. 1979 with Peter Neville and 1980 with Tony Hicks. Yeah, a few months apart, but we're sort of celebrating the 30 and 31st anniversaries.
And so is this the first time they've played on this work, though?
Yes. There's a great story about this. And when I premiered this at Musica La Mama in 94, in the audience was Peter Neville and Tony Hicks. And Tony came up to me and said, I want to play on this. And I said something rude to him and say, no, it's mine, I'm having, be gone. And, because it was, I just got to that spot and I wanted to keep it for a while. But, we've been bumping into each other in different cities over the last few years, and he says, well, we're going to play together again. And last time in Adelaide, last year, he mentioned, and I thought, all right. So I thought, yes, this would be a nice vehicle to actually get back and play. And when we got our first rehearsal, we got in and 2-3 hours later, we didn't stop playing. It was just it was like we never stopped playing. So it was a great reunion.
Well, he's also had 16 years to think about what he was going to play.
Yeah, and it's I won't say it's all right, but no, it's exactly Mr. Hicks,
So then, do you score parts for Tony Hicks and for Peter Neville, or do you allow them to bring to the work their own interpretation of the source material? Yeah,
well, look, I've always been interested in the way a palimpsest works, and so the idea of texts being overwritten and rewritten, but yet the underwritten part is never gone.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a great work called the Novgorod Codex, which I found in a Russian monastery, and they with X-ray imagery, they found this wax tablet, a history, a subterranean history of all the hymns that this guy, this church would sing over years and years back in the Middle Ages. So, I love the idea of all these texts actually coexisting and working on each other. So when Hicksy comes in at times, I said, yeah, this is appropriate for you to be there, but how about you now? I'm interested in his response, not so much as an arrangement, but I said, what does it mean to you to be in this spot? Do something that that tells me about where you are at that particular moment, and then we try to negotiate. Whose will is stronger. I was an electric bass player as a teenager. But towards the end of my teens, playing with some other guy, a pianist, and said, "Oh, I want to do some jazz, and why don't you get one of those big things?" And I thought, "Oh, but of course, that's what you do." And then, so I did, and then I realised that you have to learn to play it, and then there goes the journey. So the last, 30 odd years is that journey, and it is a love. But it's also once you remove the double bass out of the context it's usually slotted into, it becomes your voice, it becomes your notepaper, it becomes aspects of your psyche that you weren't sure you had. And while there's that richness there, the journey continues.
And so do you spend any time playing any other instruments? And does that reveal another side of your psyche, or you're happy to really express yourself through this one instrument?
I've got to say that, as another father, how short time is. When I have some time, it's on the bass.
Well, I must say, in my experiences, you can say an awful lot with an instrument that has just 4 strings and no frets, which would terrify me. Nick Tsiavos, it's always a pleasure. Let's go out with some work from Nick Tsiavos and Quintet.